Hey, what's happening, y'all? Matt here. Following up and continuing with the how I produce the cover song series, and this is after the last video, the rhythm guitar stuff, for which I can only apologize and say shit happens. Oh, it was so awful. I had some settings wrong in OBS that I didn't catch until far, far, far too late. And yeah, it sucked. But I'll show you what I discovered. Kind of some rookie mistakes, but could be useful. So let me switch over to screen capture and forgive the window thing that we're gonna see here. It's if I'm gonna show you OBS, it's what's gonna come up. So anyway, so I've got my audio from Pro Tools coming out my control room outs on my board physically, because that just mimics whatever's coming out of the main out and going into my Scarlett, which I have set up here as the Scarlett 1 and 2. I had been playing around whenever we were still at the duplex with some different settings and doing different things with this, with the mixer, and I didn't set things back. So if I go to the advanced audio properties for that, so the way I had this set to mono and panned all the way to the right. So, and I was playing back in Pro Tools, and during just playback, I was seeing the meter going right here on that input device. And so I went, okay, cool, I'm getting signal, and moved on. And I made the rookie mistake of not stopping recording and checking playback to make sure I was actually hearing what I wanted. So that should be fixed now. I need to make sure it's fixed on both scenes. Okay. So that shouldn't be an issue. The only other issue was the voice channel dropping out for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure why that happened. But it happened, so all I can do is move on and try to make sure it doesn't happen again. So let's check a couple things. So I'm going to go back into screen capture. I'm going to go open Pro Tools and make sure that my playback engine's correct. It is. All right. And then let's just play back a section. Now that control room out because that's really hot. Okay. Okay, and so that gives me something to, and it looked like the 2 meters were doing different things. That's promising, but let me stop recording, go check the footage, and then come back so that we can be sure that it's doing what we want it to do. Good news, I checked the footage and everything seems to be working like it's supposed to. So let's go back in here and yeah. We will revisit some of those rhythm guitar tracks before we dive into what I did with the lead guitar and talk about all that stuff. Let me ungroup those so we can solo up some tracks and hear what they each sounded like. So we saw in the last video kind of how I created a lot of these sounds, but we didn't really get to hear them. So that's what we're going to kind of check that out. And so you can see through the process where I comped all those tracks. And let's see, where do we want to start? And actually, we could probably, you'll get to hear more of the drums too, because the drums probably were also just coming through from that right channel and were in mono. And so this will also be a chance to hear what the drums are going to sound like in a stereo mix. So there's a section where it's just the rhythm guitars playing. And so I adjusted how I was doing the mix in that the naming scheme I'm using rhythm guitar to refer to James's rhythm tracks through the entirety of the song. And then I'm using lead guitar to refer to what would be Kirk playing along with James's rhythm part for most of the song, right? So in the original, it was, you had the rhythm guitars panned left and right, and then Kirk's solo dead center when that happens. So I've got rhythm guitar, lead guitar, solo guitar that are the three different parts. And we'll talk a little bit more about the lead guitar part later. So when I say rhythm guitar part, I'm referring to that one part. So I've double layered that, and I've got the 4 tracks for each layer. I've got my DI track, which I've got Amplitude, currently running from the 90s preset. And then I've got my Loadbox from the Marshall, which I've got Torpedo Wall of Sound running with a 421 model and a 57 model, both really close to the cabinet. No real compression. At this point, I haven't done a whole lot aside from making the 57 side a little brighter and the 421 side a little darker. I might could add some power amp distortion to that, and we'll kind of dial in some sounds as we go through things. Then I've got an ML2, so a Slate modeling mic, and right now I'm modeling a Royer 121 going into an 1176, and that's all I'm doing right now is just no EQ, no compression, just a mic model and a preamp model. And then I've got my SM57, which I ran through my Behringer 1273, the second channel on that, to get more analog goodness sound. So if we solo that one up, let me remember 6, 14, 5, 14. And let me set all of these to unity. Okay. So back to the DI, now at unity gain. All right. Now switching to the Loadbox. And you can hear that's a lot lower. Let me boost that a little bit. So if we wanted to, we can make some adjustments here, see what we get. Before I do that, let me select a clip to loop. Yeah, I've got loop playback turned on. Oh, I lost my ring light. I like this part of this plugin, being able to adjust mic distance without incurring phase issues. So the harmonics tab thing is bringing in some cool tones, but it's also increasing some clicky, poppy, noisy stuff. So I think I need to treat that with a little bit of okay. So bypass, that's what we got straight out of the Loadbox. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna keep the compression off. That's making the clicky poppies too prevalent. Those little pig strikes. So that's not bad. I can dig that. And I'm actually going to duplicate that over here and replace it for the load box on the second layer of that. And yeah, might make some adjustments there. All right, let's check out the ML2. Bring that down to Unity. So, and we'll look at kind of what's possible with the ML2. I've got and turn off the virtual drive on that. So if we cycle through some of the different things, like if we were to model a 57, which in this case I wouldn't do because I already have a 57, like a real 57 on it, but so modern 57 versus vintage, we can do an SM7B. Sounds pretty good. Sennheiser 421. It's weird that the 421 model actually sounds less bassy than the 57. Alright. Electro Voice RE20. You can even do some bass mics, like putting D112 on it. U67 and U47, C414, Slate Custom Tom sounds pretty good. Don't like the 414 on it. oddly enough, I think I'm going to change my mind to go with the D112. A 57 and a D112 on speaker cap. So, and then you can change the proximity. Get that all up in there for that proximity effect. So if I wanted to, I could even come in here and slap an EQ on it. Typically go with the SSL style. High pass this pretty high. Because a lot of that low end is just going to be filled in by the bass guitar. You know what? Let's do a really narrow Q there. There's the clickies. Lighten the Q back up. Okay. So I use this band to cut the clickies out a little bit, and then used my high shelf at a higher frequency to kind of bring back more of the high-end life. Even do something similar with the lows. So we can compare that with what we've got on the other one. Rolling. Okay. Let's see. Add this down. About there. All right. Okay, let's kind of bring these back down to where I had them. So I think it was -5, -14, -6. Okay, and that's here what we got with the SM57 going through the Behringer 1273. And is voice channel still working? It is. Cool. All right. Okay. So for that one, I'll just start with the virtual mix rack because I can get to a lot of different stuff. It's already gone through a preamp, but if I want a little bit more kind of analogness to it, I could put it on going through a virtual channel. Say I'm going to put it on a Brit in, which would be a Neve. And then What would I do? Let's see. Let's put another EQ on it. So that does add a little bit of something. Again, we're going to high pass these pretty high, around 80 to 120. Okay, just the clickies around 6K again. Drop it, widen the Q, boost this up to around 10K. There's another clicky around 2K. And then another thing I like to do sometimes is just slap a little revival on there. Okay. So that sounds pretty good just as it is, but we made it sound even better. So I'll drop this back down to around -14. And then we'll listen back. And it's usually better to listen to this in context. Let's see. Let's go to somewhere where there's other things going on. Okay. And let's place that and move that over there. All right, and now we can add in our second layer. Okay, I like that. And then I can regroup them on solo. Cool. All right, and so that is what our rhythm guitars will actually end up sounding like. Double check OBS again, make sure my voice channel, everything's working. It looks okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the lead guitars. So that would be these down here. You can see there's a lot fewer tracks. And what I'm going to end, let me back up. So one thing I'm going to do now that all this is mixed, I am going to bounce these out. So I'm going to pass them through the board, maybe through the SSL Fusion, and then back into the board and record each layer of rhythm guitar parts as a track. So all these four will be combined to one track, and all these four will be combined to one track. Save on CPU processing and kind of hard code the decisions that I've made thus far. And then I can continue manipulating that, right? I can still slap an EQ on it, still slap a virtual mix rack, and increase some distortion, do different stuff there. But yeah, those will get printed down into stems. So moving on to the lead guitar. So I only have 4 tracks total for that because I'm coming out of the Katana, and I decided not to move mics around to put microphones on a speaker cabinet. I just got the DI and the Loadbox, and this is what it looks like. And so I did the same thing here that I did with the rhythm guitar parts, right? So I go through and I start at the beginning and I play through, and if I mess up, I stop, I back up a little bit, and then I try and keep going. And I do all that all the way through, and I did that, let's see. So I did that twice on each layer. And then I go through and I take those 2 takes and I comp them together. So I pick the best parts out of each of those takes and put them together into one best version, right? And let's see. I mean, just to show you kind of what that looks like. So I'm in playlist view, and I'll go through and I'll listen, just to show you how this works where we can actually hear it. And I'll play through, and I'll listen to it in context, or I might solo it up. Right? And I'll go, okay. And I'll hit this little button here, and I'll listen to this version. All right, now listen to this version. And I'll pick whichever one I thought was best, and I'll highlight it, and then I'll hit this button and it'll toss it up here. And then I can add in the fades and things, and during that time I'm also going through and deleting the empty spots. And that's how I comp stuff. Aha, looky there. I caught a bad fade. All right, and so I comp together, and I try not to do like too small of sections unless there's like something I find that's an oopsie that I need to fix, right? I try and do fairly large sections of that. And that's just how we go through the recording process on guitars. So sometimes I'll only do 2 takes, sometimes I'll do 3 or 4. Depends on if there's stuff that I'm having a hard time with, or if I feel like there might have been a couple oopsies and I need to make sure I've got my bases covered. It all just kind of depends. So go back to waveform view. And you know, so let's talk about arrangement wise. Because as you've already heard, there are parts of this, what I'm calling the lead guitar part, that are decidedly different from the original. And you've got to be careful with this. Top Music Attorney has a video talking about this very thing with covers. Is there's a line that's kind of a gray area between what is a cover versus what is considered to be iterative. And she's got a whole other word for what that's called that I don't remember off the top of my head. But in order for something to be a true cover, which is where you don't necessarily have to seek out artist permission, you're able to just publish it so long as the artist is getting their share of royalties. I think it's like 7 cents on the dollar per purchase. You're good to go. If you're doing video, you do still have to set up a sync license, and that's a different subject. But for releasing a cover song through like DistroKid or whatever, in order for that to happen, your version needs to be very, very true to the original. You can change the instrumentation, you can make adjustments to like certain pacing things, but you can't change the overall nature of the song. You can't completely change the structure of the song. You can't completely write different parts. It has to be immediately recognizable as the original song for it to be considered a cover. When you get beyond those lines and it becomes more iterative, it's no longer classified as a cover. You have to go and like get permission from the artist and make an agreement, and it turns into a whole thing. So when you're doing covers, that's part of the reason why a lot of the internet is filled with covers that are just, I wouldn't say not creative, but they're so true to the original that it's really just showing the person's skill in playing that piece, not necessarily demonstrating as much creative work in the piece itself, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not trying to talk trash about those artists, but there's a reason why that works. A, it works for the algorithm. B, it works legally to make sure that your bases are covered. So I'm kind of trying to be a little bit more creative with this while at the same time staying true to the original. And staying true to the original can be a good thing for learning, I will say. I've done several covers where I've tried to keep really true to the original in an effort to discover what makes the original good, right? What decisions did they make? How do I get that guitar tone? How do I get those drum sounds? How do I do this? How do I do that? What parts did they write? What arrangement did they do? So doing a cover that's true to the original can also be really good for learning. So if you're learning about music production, if you're learning about songwriting, if you're learning about any of that stuff, I actually encourage you to try and create recording sessions and go back and try to do some cover songs in the genres and areas that you're wanting to learn, and try to do it as close to the original as possible. It may or may not be anything you decide you want to release, but it is a really good learning experience. So try that out. But in my arrangement of this, I wanted to do something a little bit more creative, but I want to make sure that I stay safely on the side of the line that's not going to cause a lot of legal difficulties for me. And so what I ended up doing is the structure is the same. The tempo changes are roughly the same. They're just more, like we talked about in the first video, a little bit more structured than maybe you'd see in the original. But for this lead guitar part is where I deviate. And I'm doing that by still mostly doing what the original did, but then for certain lines, I'm performing them a perfect fifth up from, I think it's a fifth. Could be a fourth, but I'm pretty sure it's a fifth. It's been a couple weeks since I recorded this. it's still playing the same thing. It's the same part. It's just on the right side. There's certain little sections that are shifted up a little bit. And I think that feels a little bit more modern because we've gotten used to listening to things like, in my day and age, let me date myself, listening to a lot of Trivium and stuff that have more complex guitar harmonies happening. So trying to stay kind of in that. And so we can hear that if we go back to the song start. So the right and left are playing the same thing up until where the drums enter. And when the drums enter, that right side is going to shift up and start playing something a little different. So see, it's pretty much still just what the original did. There's just a little difference. And so we can go into this section and doing something similar. So the chuggy part, dun 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 dun, I'm keeping the same. But then when it goes into the single notes, then the right side is shifting up again. Right. So I'm keeping with that same theme throughout pretty much the whole song. There are some different parts. Yeah, so that pre-chorus is one where I start doing something a little different. Let me grab a guitar. I'm not going to plug in, but I can kind of check stuff out. And this is a guitar I used for the rhythm part, so let me go ahead and grab the guitar I used for the lead part, which would be my ESP LTD. Man, I love this guitar. I know I talked about this, another thing, but look at that. Isn't that pretty? Even though it's dirty. Love that quilt. Anyway. So, on the left side, I'm just using the regular 5 chords, the power chords. Right? On the left side, I'm using a technique that I use on a lot of my tunes where and usually on my songs, I'm not doing one on the left, one on the right, one version on the left, one version on the right. I'm doing a layer on each side of one version and then a layer on each side of the other, where I'm using a double stop. So I'm having, instead of playing, the root and the fifth, I'm playing the root and the octave. And then jumping up. So it creates this different emphasis. So it adds a little bit more of that high and low and cuts out a little bit of that fifth. It's just a different texture. It's just something that I like. All right. And so if we go up to the chorus, this is another place where I made some changes. And you can also hear I'm chugging a lot more in this song or doing more gallops. Right? The original is very straight. I've always felt that this song would sound really cool with more of those. Now, in the original, with the chorus, when I actually went to learn it and record it for this part, and it didn't sound quite right, and I dove back into the original recording and realized that they're playing that a lot higher than I ever played it, and that I thought it should be. They're up here. That was kind of shocking for me. That felt really high. So I decided to change up both parts for that just slightly. So still playing the same chord structure, but I'm kind of taking a page from like Bullet for My Valentine with Tears Don't Fall. You know, this guitar's in a different tuning, but you know, they're using that chord shape. Don't know off the top of my head what it's called, but where they've got that added on to what would be a barred power chord. And so it's like, okay, what if I take that for the rhythm part and I use my and I just add that. So then I'm still getting that highness, those high pitches that are in the original, but I'm adding more of the low notes that I felt made it feel better. So I'm doing that on the left, and on the right I'm doing my double stop thing. So this is what we get. See what I mean? So it's the same structurally, like chord structure, root notes, all that is exactly the same as the original. It's just adding some more harmonic content isn't the right word, but adding a little bit more complexity. And yeah, let's see what else we got. So that's all the same. Let's see, let's check out the break. Okay, so the break is where both parts sync up again, for the most part. So those descending notes that harken back to the chorus part, they do split again into what they did in the chorus. And I did an up, down, instead of just all down notes on that. Intro riff repeated. And I do the same thing that I did in the intro, is when those drums come in. The guitar part split up again. And that all stays the same as pretty much what we've talked about, and then we get to the outro riff. So you can hear there's a change there, and so I follow that same kind of formula all the way out to the end, where there's one version of the riff, and then the drums change, and the right guitar shifts up a little bit, right? You It either shifts up or it starts using the double stop. And it's not exactly a like super tight, but neither was the original. This song is really meant to be really raw, so I wasn't that concerned with getting everything super tight with all the layers. Kind of letting it be a little messy, and I think it works. All right, so let's talk a little bit about tone. Let's find a good section. All right, so like I said, we've got the DI, we've got the Loadbox. The DI, I'm running Amplitude, and just that's that same from the 90s preset. And then the line out from the Katana, and I've got nothing on it yet. So let's take that out and just solo these up. We're doing -10, -2.5. Okay. So let's solo that. Right, pretty much what we heard before. Switch to the line out. It's hard to beat. It's hard to beat that. The Katana, I love that amp. You just get good tones from it, and the line out just works really well. But I'm going to put some of that on there, and a little bit of EQ, and where's Revival? Okay, so let's bring that up. I don't really necessarily want to do a whole lot of EQ, I don't think. Like I'm gonna sweep, see if I find anything just nasty, but All right. And I know that cuts out a lot of the low end beef, but that's going to get filled in with bass guitar later. I'm not worried about that. In fact, this could probably stand to be moved over there, and over there, and over there, and over there. It's pretty consistently across this guitar tone that 2K and 6K areas are a little harsh and unpleasant. So those couple little dips, I think, are improving things. Okay, getting those two sides a little bit more even. Save that. Okay. And so that, I think, gets us dialed in for our rhythm slash lead guitar parts. And next we'll be moving on to solo guitar and bass guitar. So I need to learn a guitar solo. We'll see. It should be okay, but I'll go through the same process. Solos, I usually do a lot more takes. So I'll probably do 4 to 5 takes and comp those together in this section right here. And I'm trying to decide how I'm going to do that. I don't know. Because I was thinking I wanted to use the Green Monster, which I've done a video on the Green Monster. If you haven't watched it, go check it out, because this thing's nuts. So this is the Green Monster. It is a S-Series Ibanez from late 90s, early 2000s. And super thin body. And I got this from a friend who got it from a family member, and it had issues. Like the bridge, Floyd Rose, was broken. And some different things, and his uncle gave it to him and said, "You fix it, it's yours." And then he said, "Same thing to me, fix it, it's yours." So I changed out lots of stuff. I changed out the bridge, changed out the tuners, changed out the pickups, installed them with triple shots, changed out the switch, and so it's got a 5-way super switch. And then I added a push-pull to engage, I think it's the bridge in positions 4 and 5, effectively making it a 7-way switch. And then with the triple shots, allowing any kind of coil selection with those humbuckers. So this is a tone machine, and it's with those Pias, get that Steve Vai, Satriani kind of sound. Like, this is an awesome guitar, and it sounds really good on this kind of thing. But I have it set up in standard. Me standard. And I don't necessarily want to reset this up and redial in a Floyd Rose trem system to do one guitar solo. Now I could work on learning the song and seeing. I don't think there's many open notes in this solo. So if there's not, and most everything's up here, I can learn the solo and then just transpose everything down a whole step. So I'm going to try that and see if I can figure that out and pull it off. If not, I'll just grab a different guitar. Maybe use the Harley Benton that I used on the rhythm tracks and just dial things in a little differently. Probably use the Katana. But I don't know. That's going to take some experimentation and some trying around of things. I could use. This would be interesting. I could use this one, which I did a video on this too, and I just did another improved setup on it now that I've learned some more things about creating fall away. This is my very first guitar, an Ibanez Geo, that I put the Kirk Hammett pickup set in. So it being Kirk Hammett pickups, maybe do it on a Kirk Hammett song. And it's got a trim system, but not a Floyd Rose, so it's less of a pain in the booty. I could probably get away with tuning this a half step down and just learning the song as is. But that's all going to take some experimentation and will be for another video. So I'm going to call it there. Let me put this up. Oh. And then we will double check this footage and do another edit, and hopefully this makes up for the egregious error that was that last video. Like I said, I'm sorry. I did not catch it in time. I thought everything was working well until I got in the edit, and then it was not. So here, let me switch back to my default scene here. Okay. And then minimize OBS so I don't look at it. But yeah, that's what we're looking at. That's what we've got thus far, and I'm going to keep working on it, get the solo done, and then the bass guitar. Now, I've asked my coworker Meg if she wanted to do the bass guitar part for this song, and she said she would. So that might work a little bit different as far as documenting. I might document my methods, and then that might not be the actual bass track that gets used in the song. Or maybe Meg will be down for, coming over here on a Saturday morning when, my wife and kid go and run some errands and documenting working together. I don't know. We will see what happens there. But that's where we're at. And then once we get those done, just move on to vocals, and that'll be the last stage of recording before we get into mixing and do a video on mixing and then do a video on mastering. So we're on our way, we're rocking and rolling, we're getting through this tune, and hopefully it's going to come out on the other side as being a real freaking banger. But that's all for now. Tune in next time. We'll continue working through this, and as always, I appreciate you. You're awesome, and have a good one.